This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, when Keith Ellison broke bread with Farrakhan. Back by popular demand, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman Fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center and the writer/editor of the blog The Point at frontpagemag.com. Daniel, what an honor to have you back.
The honor is completely mine.
And I'm so relieved the hat is back. But Daniel, something really strange is going on, because when you look at all of your videos on the Glazov Gang, about 70–80% of the comments are about the hat. What's going on?
Well, I think the hat really should have its own blog, its own vlog, its own show, because the hat is clearly much more popular than I am. The hat has insights I don't have, so maybe you could just interview the hat next time around.
Daniel, the hat has kind of taken on a life of its own.
It has. I feel very proud to have given birth to this phenomenon.
Okay, but on a serious note, before we move forward, at this point, in your view, what is the meaning, symbolism, role of the hat?
Well, I feel like the hat represents the higher aspirational wisdom of the upper planes of the universe, while I just represent the lower common sense ideas of this world, just speaking philosophically, of course.
Thanks for joining us. Thank you for joining the Glazov Gang. Okay, that is the entertainment portion of the show. Now for the serious issue. Daniel Greenfield, Ellison, I think at the moment he's the deputy chair of the DNC. Well. In the past, he worked for Farrakhan. He praised Farrakhan. Then later he came out saying, oh, he's very disillusioned with Farrakhan. He doesn't agree with his anti-Semitic views, etc., etc. Now all of a sudden, now it turns out that he met with him as well as Rouhani. Tell us about this.
So Keith Ellison has been lying about his past with the Nation of Islam, with Farrakhan, for quite a long time. Once the Bernie Sanders gang began pushing him to head the DNC, this issue began coming to the fore, and Keith Ellison lied about it. He said this was just something that happened back in college. It was completely not. When he originally first ran for public office, he actually ran as a member of the Nation of Islam. He was with the Nation of Islam probably for around 11 years. We're still kind of guessing. John at Powerline put together this very extensive timeline trying to nail everything together. If you look at his media presence, at his articles, at his writings in the past, it's clearly been a member of the Nation of Islam for a very, very long time. But he's been lying about it throughout the whole DNC thing. He was claiming this was just a very temporary thing. This was very brief. It's long gone, and they're just bringing it up because they're right-wing extremists. And now, obviously, as you mentioned, at this point, he had already disclaimed the Nation of Islam. This was part of the whole thing where he actually ran for Congress. He had to tell the Jewish community, I completely reject this sort of thing. And then, of course, as you mentioned, he was at a dinner hosted by by Rouhani, by the man who was at the top of the official government that's responsible for Iran's foreign policy of terrorism. And he was there meeting with him, and Farrakhan was there, and the whole gang was there. And this, in a way, is very reminiscent of what recently came out, which was the Obama-Farrakhan photo. Like Ellison, Obama had a bit of a past with Farrakhan. Part of a church that basically worshipped Farrakhan. He'd been with the Million Man March. And then he came out and said, of course, had absolutely nothing to do with Farrakhan. They completely disavow him. Though, of course, he played games, and he had to pull teeth to get him to even say that much. And then, of course, now we have a photo released of him meeting with Farrakhan and smiling with Farrakhan. So there's a pattern there.
By the way, that photo was hidden for 13 years. Very interesting. Look, there's so many aspects to this whole Ellison-Farrakhan romance. Just let me try to get to a few things here. Okay. First, there's a report now that Ellison is just saying, hey, look, I met with them, but it wasn't an endorsement. That's a report that he's saying that. Daniel, can you imagine that neo-Nazis and the Ku Klux Klan is meeting at some, conference, and you just happen to show up there knowing that the Ku Klux Klan and the Nazis are there, and you break bread with them, you sit around with them, you talk to them, but hey, I wasn't endorsing them. Daniel, we know who Farrakhan is and the statements he has made and what he represents in terms of what he has said about Jewish people, about Israel, what he says about white people, etc., etc. We know who Rouhani is, the vicious regime that he heads, what they are planning to do with Israel, how they treat their own people. Why is Keith Ellison so comfortable in their company? And isn't there a time and place where it doesn't matter if you're endorsing someone or not? You do not shake hands with them. You do not socialize with them. You do not go where they are.
So you mentioned Israel. Now, while Keith Ellison, in theory, changed his affiliation from the Nation of Islam, which is not really Islamic, because we would understand it, it's a kind of a goofy black nationalist racist cult, to mainstream Sunni Islam, much like Malcolm X, his views on Israel, his anti-Semitism has remained very consistently the same. He just switched over from the Nation of Islam to CARE, and both of those are violently anti-Semitic organizations. So when it came to getting out there, meeting with Rouhani, being there with Farrakhan, these were, when it comes to Jews, when it comes to anti-Semitism, when it comes to Israel, their views along that spectrum are all consistent. Keith Ellison didn't have to change his views on Israel or on Jews when he made that leap. What he did was make the leap from something that's kind of a racist left-wing cult to mainstream Islam, which is, of course, also racist and quite violent and quite bigoted in many ways. A number of people have made that switch. It didn't make them better people, because Islam itself its own views are just every bit as toxic as the Nation of Islam. Just the Nation of Islam has some stranger ideas, like believing that white people were created by a mad scientist named Yaqub, or that all non-black people were created by this mad scientist, that UFOs are going to come down at the end of, I think, 6,000 years and blow up everybody who's against the Nation of Islam and that sort of thing. They believe the UFOs are now in orbit. So they have beliefs that are weirder, but the reality is Islam or the Nation of Islam, they're both anti-Semitic, they're both racist. And so for Keith Ellison, he made a comfortable switch to something that's more politically correct, because the Nation of Islam is still considered out there even by left-wing groups. Even the Southern Poverty Law Center lists them as a hate group, but organizations like CARE are very bigoted, very hateful, but they're mainstream, and Iran under Obama became very mainstream also. So you could be a leftist, you could be in good standing in the Democrats, and you could make that switch, and that's what Keith Ellison did.
Right, I mean, I don't know. It's sort of like you join a Nazi organization that wants to annihilate Jews, apart from other things, and then you're making statements about how you're really, really disassociating yourself from one particular anti-Semite. Like the Muslim Brotherhood front groups. A Muslim Brotherhood front group paid for Ellison's Hajj to Saudi Arabia. Like, he has so many links to the Muslim Brotherhood. And our viewers, go to Daniel Greenfield. You go to the point. Just do Google searches. Daniel Greenfield, Keith Ellison. He writes all about it. Go to discoverthenetworks.com and you can look up the profile of Keith Ellison. Go to Jihad Watch. Google Robert Spencer, Keith Ellison. All of these great, brilliant scholars have documented this past, this hateful anti-Semitic past. So Daniel, we have a guy that is dedicated to anti-Semitism, hangs with anti-Semites, but is pretending that he's upset with Farrakhan's anti-Semitism.
Well, it's the difference between stealth jihad and violent jihad, as some people call it. So the Nation of Islam is openly violent, it's openly hateful, it's openly bigoted. Farrakhan openly says very ugly things. And then there are groups like CARE that have a history of saying these things, but they've learned to remake their image, and they've learned to operate and fly under the radar. And for Keith Ellison to be successful, he had to learn to fly under the radar. He had to learn to do the stealth thing. He's in stealth mode.
Okay, look, do you think that there obviously were photos taken during this little get-together they had, no?
I'm sure there were. We've seen some photos published, but the reality is, again, as we've seen with the Obama-Farrakhan photo, they very much have the ability to censor those photos they don't want released. And the interesting thing now about the Nation of Islam and that photo is the Nation of Islam now effectively also has a means of leverage, a means of blackmail. Throughout the time when Obama was in office, they had this explosive photo that they could release anytime they wanted to. And I'm sure they have plenty of photos of Keith Ellison. They have photos of other legislators who met with them. And so the other question, aside from the whole associating with racist issue, is what are these politicians doing as favors to avoid the release of these photos? What did Obama do to prevent the release of this photo?
Well, look, when it comes to Farrakhan, you know, he's called Jews bloodsuckers. He's called Judaism a gutter religion. He's described Adolf Hitler as a great man. He's talked about white devils. He's talked about the white man as being the Antichrist, etc., etc., etc. Why is Ellison so comfortable in his presence?
Well, ultimately, the Nation of Islam is a black nationalist religion, which means it's violently racist. You've given some examples. I've given some examples of that. When it comes to Keith Ellison and Barack Obama, they're both also black nationalists. That's why you have so many members of the Congressional Black Caucus, for that matter, who are comfortable with Farrakhan, because what unites them is black nationalism. So, and that's a fundamentally racist idea, and yet it's very mainstream now. Black nationalism has been widely mainstreamed on the left. Its racism has been deemed legitimate when football players refuse to honor the anthem for black nationalist reasons. They're celebrated for it, and that's a major problem.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, look, Antifa. Posing as an anti-fascist movement, we know that this is a fascist movement, violent movement. They dress up like ISIS. They engage in violence, drown and suffocate free speech, attack anybody that says anything that they disagree with, etc., etc. Antifa, leftist fascist movement. Keith Ellison poses with the anti-fascist, with the Antifa, the Anti-Fascist Handbook by Mark Bray. What does that mean?
Well, you mentioned Keith Ellison becoming the second guy in command at the DNC. He's the DNC vice chair. That happened because of backing from the Bernie Sanders wing of the Democratic Party. And the Bernie Sanders wing basically represents the far, far left. Even among Democrats, the Democrat Party these days is run by the far left, but they represent the absolutely far left wing. So he's signaling to them that he's got their back, that he's also part of this radical extremist left, the one that really hates America, that hates Jews, that seeks to destroy civilization as we know it.
Right. Just a sec, Daniel. What is his position right now at the DNC? The deputy chair, the vice chair?
I believe he's the vice chair. But it's an invented position. This was a position that was invented just for him.
But he may be heading to be the head of the DNC, correct?
Well, that was the goal. He ran to head of the DNC when this controversy was breaking about his ties to the Nation of Islam. He was running to head of the DNC. The Bernie Sanders wing backed him to the head of the DNC. Obama actually came out for his opponent, and Keith Ellison got the second job as a consolation prize. This was a job that was invented for him.
Okay, so just a sec. So we have a deputy chair of the DNC meeting with Farrakhan, all of this stuff that we're discussing. Daniel, what does this say about the Democratic Party?
Well, it says that the Democratic Party is a radical party. It's a radical left-wing party. It's also a very bigoted party. It's a party that is the party of Linda Sarsour. It's the party of care. And yes, it's the party of Farrakhan, as the Obama-Farrakhan photo, as the latest revelations about Keith Ellison make clear. They're very comfortable with Islamism, with black nationalism, with assorted racist, anti-Semitic ideologies. And that is a major problem because it means that one of the two major parties in this country is now under the influence and the sway of radical bigots.
Daniel, so, you know, Keith Ellison meeting with Farrakhan, it's all being exposed. It's a big story for truth tellers at The Point, at Front Page, Jihad Watch, you know. But I go to the major establishment media, you know, and I went to CNN and MSNBC, Rachel Maddow, Don Lemon, Anderson Cooper. You know, surely they're talking about the Ellison connection with Farrakhan, but what do I find? Oh, North Korea. Oh, the sister of the dictator. She's the new Ivanka Trump. What's going on here? Not just, you know, what's this, as you called it in your blog, the media's incuriosity with this issue?
Well, the media maintains an embargo on stories that don't fit the narrative. Thus, for example, the release of the Obama-Farrakhan photo, I believe only 2 or 3 mainstream media sources even reported it at all. And, if there was a photo of Trump with David Duke, you'd better believe it would be front page news and it would be over cable news for weeks and weeks on end. So it's not just in curiosity, it's certainly in curiosity, but it's a deliberate resistance and a refusal to address anything. In the past, I've said that the only way the media would ever address the Obama-Farrakhan photo is if Trump mentions it, because then they're going to have to argue against it. But when the narrative doesn't break through the media's embargo, then they just keep going, and that's what they're doing with Ellison and Farrakhan. Long before this, they were letting Ellison get away with blatant lies about his time in the Nation of Islam, and if any Republican had tried to do something like that, the media would quickly fact-check him. But when they came to Ellison, they threw him these softball questions. They accepted his lies that he had just been involved in this in college. Completely not true. He'd been doing this when he had 4 kids, and he was a practicing lawyer. So the idea this was something he was dabbling in when temporary while in college is completely not true. But the media let him get away with it. The media lets the people it supports get away with lying. It covers from them, it lies for them, it embargoes negative stories about them until the stories somehow break through, and then it plays defense.
Daniel Greenfield, in one sentence, what is the significance of this story?
The significance is that black nationalism has become mainstream. It's a violent racist ideology, and those who promote it have to be held accountable for their bigotry.
Daniel Greenfield, an honor and a pleasure to have you on the Glazov Gang.
My honor and my pleasure.
If you don't mind, after the show, I need to call you. We need to just discuss a few aspects and matters about the hat, okay?
Of course. I'll keep it up the line.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us this evening. Please remember, we're a fan-generated program. If you like our show and want to help us, please go to jamieglazov.com to support the program. And if anything, please be a subscriber to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. Motivate other people to do it. And click on that little bell next to it because you'll get the instant updates. Good night.